You're looking for a guitar that feels solid enough to survive weekly jam sessions, easy enough to dial in after a quick warm-up, and priced so you're not left counting pennies after the first month of gigging. That hesitation, that little voice worrying you might end up with a flashy shell that sounds great in a showroom but falls apart on the road, is exactly why I wanted to dig into the Gretsch Pro Broadkaster Jr. LX before hitting record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In the next few minutes I'll walk through what it's like to actually set this thing up in a typical bedroom talk club workflow, who will get the most mileage out of it, and where the price point really starts to make sense. First off, the Broadkaster Jr. isn't trying to be a boutique collector's piece. It's positioned as a workhorse for players who need that classic Gretsch vibe without the boutique price tag. The semi-hollow body with a maple top gives it that airy resonance you expect from a Gretsch, but the added weight of the laminated body keeps feedback in check when you crank the amp in a small venue. I tested it by plugging straight into a 15-watt tube amp, then cranking the master volume to about 75% while using a modest overdrive pedal. The result was a warm, slightly twangy tone that stayed clean enough for clean chords, yet responded well to a little gain for bluesy leads. It wasn't the kind of tone that screams studio only, it sits comfortably in a live mix without needing a $100 rack of EQ. The neck is a classic maple profile with an ebony fingerboard. Ebony is often a premium touch on lower-priced guitars, and on this model it shows up in the way the notes articulate. When I ran through a rapid chromatic scale, the note transition felt smooth, and the low-action setup, about 2.8 mm at the 12th fret, meant I didn't have to press hard to get a clear note. That's a big plus if you're the type who practices for an hour after work and want to avoid hand fatigue. The downside? The slimmer neck can be a bit narrow for players with larger hands who prefer a chunkier feel. I tried a few bar chords higher up the neck and, while they were certainly playable, the reduced finger room made them feel a tad cramped compared with a full-size jazz-style neck. Now let's talk about the pickups. The two Blackberry humbuckers are voiced for a balanced output that leans slightly toward the classic Gretsch twang without being overly scooped. In a clean setting they deliver a bright, articulate rhythm tone that cuts through a band's rhythm section nicely. When I switched to a mild overdrive, the mid stayed present and the high end didn't get overly harsh, which is something many entry-level humbuckers struggle with. The practical upside here is that you can walk onto a gig, plug in, and be ready for anything from clean country-style strumming to a gritty rock solo without having to swap pickups or spend a lot of time dialing tone knobs. However, because the pickups are designed to be versatile rather than hyper-specialized, you won't get that razor-sharp high-gain crunch that a dedicated metal-oriented humbucker would provide. If your primary gig is heavy distortion metal, you'll probably feel limited. One hidden trade-off shows up in the hardware. The bridge is a standard Gretsch tunomatic with a stop tailpiece. It holds intonation well enough for most chordal work, but the stop tailpiece can make string changes a bit slower compared to a tremolo system or even a modern hardtail with a quick-release saddle. In my week-long test I swapped strings twice, and each time I spent an extra 3 to 5 minutes tweaking the intonation to get the high strings sitting right. If you change strings frequently, say, you're a touring player who wants to keep the tone fresh, this might be a small annoyance. On the aesthetic side, the Blackberry finish is a deep, almost midnight hue that hides minor scuffs better than a high-gloss sunburst would. I dropped the guitar on a wooden floor once while adjusting the strap, and the finish showed only a faint dent that blended into the natural grain. That said, the lacquer isn't as thick as on higher-priced models, so over time you may notice a few light scratches if you're constantly on the road. It's a minor cosmetic issue, but for players who care about that showroom shine, it's worth noting. Who should consider this guitar? If you're a mid-level player who has outgrown a beginner solid body but isn't ready or willing to drop $1,000 for a vintage Gretsch, the Broadkaster Jr. fills that sweet spot. It's also an excellent choice for gigging musicians who need a reliable semi-hollow that won't howl feedback in a 50-person club. The tonal flexibility makes it a solid companion for country, indie rock, blues, and even light to moderate hard rock. It's also a nice entry point for students who want to explore a semi-hollow without the intimidation of a pricey vintage model. Who might skip it? Players who demand ultra-low